The skies above Lethra were blue that day, cerulean, cloudless, and wide, as if the planet itself had been holding its breath, and at last could exhale. The first Terran ships descended in formation, shining metal birds streaking across the horizon. The Letherans watched from rooftops, from plazas, from the ruins of their once great forums and statue gardens. Some wept openly. Others raised banners, hand-stitched in haste but vibrant, bearing the stylized sigil of the United Terran Accord. Children ran alongside the armored convoy as it rolled down broken roads, laughing. Someone threw flowers. Someone else sang. From orbit, it all looked like a triumph. The galaxy watched. News feeds from 100 systems streamed the images. "Humanity liberates Lethra," the headlines read. 100 commentators praised the boldness, the precision, the moral clarity of the action. Terran peacekeepers had dismantled the last mobile fleet of the Karzani regime. The slave markets had been torched. The imperial governor had been captured alive and would stand trial in a court filled with beings who had never before known the luxury of justice. Lethra, at long last, was free. Commander Yalis stood aboard the Vigilance Ascending, a lean diplomatic cruiser that now served as the center of reconstruction efforts. In his quarters, he dictated his daily log. "They say no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. I suppose the same can be said for liberation. One prepares for resistance, for confusion, for cultural trauma. But the people of Lethra, they welcomed us like long-lost kin. I worry it will make us complacent. It's easier to imagine peace when you are cheered into the city gates. But we must not let joy dull vigilance." Yalis was a career officer, but not a warrior. He had served in logistics, in planetary transition teams, and most notably as a civil envoy during the post-Romer negotiations on Eshel. His file described him as ideologically aligned with the Accord, temperamentally suited to civilian interfacing, and prone to moral idealism. That final note had been added with a hint of caution. On Lethra, he became the face of the Terran mission. He attended the reopening of the first desalination plant. He cut the ribbon on a restructured food depot, where ration cubes were replaced with proper grain shipments. He handed a physical copy of the Letheran Provisional Charter, translated and annotated in 6 native dialects, to the first regional council. All of it was smooth, easier than expected. The Letherans listened, nodded, and followed through. One of his lieutenants, a grizzled veteran named Darren, commented in private, "Either this world was starving for freedom, or they're very good at waiting." Yalis brushed it off. "Hope looks quiet when you've only ever seen pain." Aid flowed from orbit. Medical drones, atmospheric filtration units, portable housing units, fresh servers full of cultural archives. Humanities outreach teams began conducting surveys to match local needs with future aid. Governance workshops began in the capital's old library, now draped in Terran blue and gold. The Letherans did not resist. They lined up calmly for vaccinations. They registered for work programs. They accepted new transit systems with polite gratitude, even helped lay the tracks themselves. When Terran educators offered language courses and historical seminars, attendance was high. Lectures on post-imperial governance were translated in real time and beamed into community centers across the planet. Progress reports became optimistic, then glowing. "A textbook liberation," one official said in a mid-cycle interview. "Yalis and his people are setting a precedent for the future of Accord peacekeeping." Yalis believed it. He wrote long dispatches to Earth, not just in the dry format of operational briefs, but in letters and recorded logs full of metaphors. "Lethra feels like a garden long untended, overrun by vines. We've cut back the growth. What's blooming beneath surprises even us. They are not merely survivors. They are resilient thinkers. They want to build something new." The evidence was everywhere. In the capital, a young Letheran woman named Isa had translated several Terran political treatises into the melodic, poetic script of her people's traditional calligraphy. One of her transcriptions, on the inalienable rights of sentience, was posted in the central square, illuminated by solar lamps. People gathered to read it aloud line by line, some repeating the words until they committed them to memory. In the coastal city of Merrill, a collective of artists unveiled a sculpture garden. One piece, a twisting helix of stone and light, was titled Unchained Dawn. Yalis attended its unveiling and spoke briefly with the sculptors. They thanked him, They spoke in accented Terran, awkward but warm, and gave him a fragment of obsidian engraved with the names of their lost. They honor their dead by building, he recorded later, and by making the future beautiful. Local councils met with Terran advisors weekly, crafting their own provisional legislature. Yalis was careful to avoid imposing human structures outright. They must find their own rhythm, he told his team. We guide. We don't dictate. It became easy to believe that this was the model, that this time, liberty would take root without resistance, that Lethera would not only recover, but surpass expectations, becoming a beacon of Terran values, adapted and reimagined through a proud, newly liberated people. There were no protests, no armed rebellions, no sabotage. The Letherans were calm, helpful, open. And that, perhaps, should have been the first sign. But in those first months, it felt like victory, like proof that justice, properly delivered, would be met not with fear but with gratitude, that freedom, once tasted, would be enough. Yalis recorded his final log of the first cycle with serene conviction. The seeds are planted, and the soil is rich. Whatever scars this world carries, they do not define it. We were right to come. Lethera will flourish. He ended the recording, unaware that somewhere below, in a quiet district of the capital, the first whispered meetings were already being held, gatherings that did not speak of liberty or justice, but of memory. But that would come later. For now, the skies were blue, the streets were quiet, and the banners still waved. The change didn't come all at once. At first, it was in small, seemingly benign lapses. Attendance at the district councils dropped. Delegates stopped requesting updates from their Terran advisors. One week, a session in Uran district was postponed due to a spiritual alignment holiday. Then it was canceled the next. Soon, it disappeared from the rotation entirely. Aid stations that once teemed with Letheran volunteers now struggled to fill shifts. Some cited fatigue. Others simply didn't show up. Yalis noted it all but didn't panic. Cultural adjustment wasn't linear. He recorded it dutifully, phrasing it with the optimism he still clung to. We may be witnessing the first phase of sovereignty asserting itself. The Letherans must make the system their own. A step back is not failure. It is learning. But the celebrations ceased. The art installations in Merrill were taken down without warning. The public readings stopped. Transmissions that once replayed key moments of liberation, footage of burning slave ships, of Terran medics tending to injured Letheran children, were quietly removed from local media cycles. More curious were the markings. They began as etchings, on underpasses, walls carved into stone fountains or the base of trees. In the native glyphs of the old regime, not spoken aloud in decades, there emerged a phrase. A place for all, a chain for each. Terran patrols scrubbed the walls. Yalis ordered translation filters reviewed, convinced it was some idiom misunderstood by younger Letherans. But when he asked his cultural advisor, a bright-eyed Letheran named Koresh, about it, the man offered a strange smile. It is from the Book of Law, the first lawgiver's creed. We were told that doctrine was abolished. Koresh bowed his head slightly. The law was burned. The need for it wasn't. Yalis began conducting his own interviews. He abandoned the polished courtyards and bright council chambers and walked the tenement districts alone, with only a voice recorder and a translator drone. Most Letherans were polite. Some were open. None were hostile. Yet again and again he heard the same sentiment, phrased in different ways. We knew our place before. It was simpler. I do not hate freedom. I just do not understand what to do with it. They say we must all be equal, but I do not know how to lead. And I do not want to follow someone just like me. The empire was cruel, yes, but it was there. It had shape. One elderly Letheran woman said it more directly. Your democracy is like a house without a roof. I do not know when the rain will come, but I know I will drown in it. Yalis returned to the vigilance ascending in silence. He reviewed past logs looking for where the shift had begun. The art, the cancelled councils, the slow silencing of celebration. He felt as though the planet itself had turned opaque. The trust once palpable had become something else. Accommodation, perhaps, or fatigue mistaken for peace. He brought his concerns to Central Command. They listened politely and suggested increasing cultural exchange efforts. Send in Terran historians. Play videos of past liberation successes. Publish more translated works. Yalis didn't argue, but he knew they didn't see it. It wasn't hatred. It wasn't resistance. It was something deeper, the slow erosion of belief, a people whose scars had become limbs, who had been offered freedom and found it formless. And then the movement appeared. Not the empire, not in name, not in flag, but in essence. They called themselves the True Way. Their manifestos were whispered at first, then printed in small folded handbills. No grand rhetoric, just simple, steady declarations. From order comes peace. No more empty choices. A house must have walls or the wind takes it. Yalis ordered arrests, then rescinded them. The movement's leaders were difficult to define. No central council, no army. Just gatherings, more each week in homes, abandoned offices, former shrines. Human advisors were barred from attending. They weren't harassed, just not invited. And then came the election. The first open vote, 6 months of preparation. Campaigns broadcast across Lethera's public feeds, town hall debates, candidate interviews. Terran observers marked every box on their list. Free press? Check. No coercion? Check. Open forums? Check. And then the result. The True Way candidate received 91% of the vote. The remaining 9% was fractured between pro-Terran reformers and independents. The winning candidate, a middle-aged academic named Saran Droll, took the podium in the central square of the capital and spoke calmly, confidently, surrounded by flags not seen in decades, though subtly altered. We thank the Accord for their assistance. We are now free to build a Lethera that remembers who it is. The words were carefully chosen. They did not reject democracy. They absorbed it, transmuted it. In the days following, the provisional legislature was dissolved and replaced with a council of stability. The term executive authority was reworded to central guidance. Yali stood at the edge of the crowd, unacknowledged, unseen, and listened. Then the riots began. Not from the victors. They were orderly, controlled. It was the minority, young Letherans who had studied Terran political philosophy, who had painted murals, who had memorized Terran declarations of rights, who screamed in the streets. Fires broke out in government buildings. Police, hastily restructured under the new guidance guard, responded with speed and silence. Terran soldiers were ordered to stay back. Accord rules forbade intervention in democratically sovereign processes, even unpopular ones. Yalis filed emergency reports. No action came. In his next log, his voice was hollow. We planted a seed and expected a tree. What grew was something we do not recognize, but which they claim as their own. I do not know if we gave them freedom, or only made them remember their cage. He stopped the recording there. The streets burned into the night. The banners were taken down. The old symbols returned. Lethera had chosen. And humanity, for all its hopes, had no say in what the choice meant. The request came at dusk. Yalis had been reviewing casualty reports from the previous week's riots, numbers the new government insisted were unverified, no official autopsies, no public funerals. The fires had stopped, but something colder had settled across the capital, like frost along a broken window pane. A diplomatic aide knocked once, waited, and entered. She bowed briefly and said, "Ambassador Veloy requests an audience." He recognized the name. Veloy had once served as a regional cultural liaison back in the early days, a poet and administrator, one of the few native officials the Terrans had admired, not because she agreed with them, but because she had always spoken honestly, even when it bruised their pride. She entered the meeting room wrapped in slate blue robes, no insignia or ornament. She looked older than he remembered, or maybe just tired. They did not embrace. They sat, two diplomats of fading relevance, on opposite ends of a polished wood table. "I won't take much of your time," she said. Her voice, always deliberate, now had a gravel to it. "I'm not needed elsewhere," Yalis replied. "Not anymore." Veloy smiled faintly. "You were wrong about us." "I know. But not in the way you think." She looked past him, through the translucent window that overlooked the reconstruction district. A sea of rooftops and spires, shimmering beneath automated streetlights. Efficient, orderly, silent. "We thought we were chained," she said. "You came and broke the chains. We were free, and then we collapsed." She folded her hands in front of her. "We blamed you for a time. Privately, of course. We said the Terrans broke us, gave us noise and choice and made us choke on it." Yalis didn't interrupt. He simply listened. "But then," she continued, "I began to speak with the elders. Not the officials, not the advisors. The ordinary ones. Cleaners, grain counters, shrine watchers. And I understood." Her gaze returned to his. "You see slavery. We saw shelter." He flinched just slightly, not from the words, but from how calmly they were spoken. "It was cruel, yes," she said. "But it was a cruelty we understood, a structure we grew in. It told us who we were, what to do, where to belong. The whip was always raised, yes, but so was the hand to guide. We lived as one because none of us had to choose." She placed a small item on the table, a memory crystal, Terran encoded. It glowed softly. "I've compiled the stories of those who voted for the true way, not officials, just citizens. Read them, or don't. But no, most of them do not hate you. They mourn you. They mourn what you tried to give them, because they know it was offered with sincerity." Silence stretched between them. "I never believed in the Empire," she said, "but I see now why so many did." She stood slowly. "We will try to build something of our own, but it will not be what you envisioned. I'm sorry for that." Yalis rose as well. He offered his hand. She took it briefly. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" she asked. "For telling me." When she left, she did not look back. Yalis returned to his quarters that night and began his final log. Command log, Envoy Commander Yalis, timestamp, final entry. I have submitted my formal request for reassignment. The mission is complete. Lethera is sovereign. The structures are in place. The systems function. The people have chosen. I write now not with anger, but with clarity forged in disappointment. We believed freedom to be universal, an axiom self-evident, but I wonder now if liberty is not a truth of the universe, but merely the result of one culture's peculiar hunger. What if freedom to some is noise, a lack of shape? What if choice without direction feels like exile, not empowerment? I do not excuse what the Empire did, but I understand now that breaking chains is not enough. You must offer roots as well. You can't plant forests in a desert and expect trees. You must rebuild the soil first. Lethera was not ready. Perhaps no one is when liberty arrives without lineage. I fear we mistook gratitude for agreement. I fear we imposed our version of the sky upon a people who had only ever known the safety of ceilings. If they rebuild the Empire in their own image, it will not be a failure of intervention. It will be the consequence of misunderstanding. He stopped there. There were more words, surely, but none that would make sense of what he'd seen, none that would make the ending feel earned. The next day he boarded the Vigilance Ascending. The ship rose into the Letheran sky, quiet and unescorted. No one came to wave goodbye. No children ran alongside the landing struts. No banners fluttered. Lethera had returned to silence. Within weeks the Accord completed its withdrawal. Military advisors were rotated out. Relief coordinators reassigned. A final shipment of autonomous infrastructure pods was delivered, their AI pre-configured for hands-off utility management. Then the gates closed. No embargo, no hostility, just absence. Months passed. And then the declaration came. Lethera issued a formal petition to join a new interstellar body, the Empire Reformed, a coalition of worlds with shared cultural heritage, seeking mutual governance under unified tradition. The language was soft. The structure was familiar. Their founding statement was broadcast across neutral channels. We know now what we are, and we thank those who showed us our limits, that we might choose our bonds for ourselves. Freedom is not the absence of order. It is the clarity of belonging. The Terran Accord issued no statement in response. Yalis received a polite note from Central Command, acknowledging his final log and granting his reassignment to a diplomatic archive post on Mars. He never returned to Lethera. Yet in the quiet archives beneath Mars's red dust, surrounded by recorded histories and forgotten treaties, he found himself replaying the memory crystal Veloy had left behind. Voices, quiet and steady, whispered truths he had never understood, Stories not of liberation, but belonging. Sometimes he would pause, gazing through the translucent domes toward the stars. Lethera was up there somewhere, among those distant points of light, quietly orbiting in its own chosen darkness. In his dreams, Yalis no longer saw banners or hopeful crowds. Instead, he saw the faces he had missed, the elders with gentle resignation in their eyes, the sculptors whose silent gestures spoke louder than words, the young who once sang for freedom, but whose songs had turned to mourning. And every night, the dreams ended the same, with him standing at the edge of a familiar city square, the sky overhead neither bright nor stormy, but silent and gray. He reached out to speak, to apologize, perhaps to understand. But no words ever came. Only the quiet remained, as it always had, a silence neither of liberation nor imprisonment, but of acceptance, and in time he learned to accept it too.